When I started, I didn't think that bootstrapping was sexy. I didn't think that bootstrapping was the way to go. I saw so much what was highlighted in the conversation for entrepreneurs, centered around how much did you raise and who are the people that are like giving you money. And so watching the last few years, I mean, I thank you for acknowledging that. It's been really hard. It's been really hard for entrepreneurs. It's been hard on small businesses. It's been just like a continuous up and down. And I think that it kind of also rebranded people that are bootstrapping from, so I think it's been fascinating. And so if you are somebody that is bootstrapping, first of all, congratulations. Like there's just so much freedom in the choice that you're making for yourself.
Martians landed.
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits.
Yes.
Drinking Henry Seltzer.
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit.
Yes, and?
Your branding here.
Yes, brand.
Your message here.
Yes, and?
A verse about.
Yes.
Your product here.
Yes.
I'm Hirsch Redford.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
In the hot seat today on Yes Brand is Valerie Trapunsky. Valerie is the founder and CEO at ChatterBoss, a name that I love. We'll talk about the origin of that name. She's the author of Delegation Nation, which makes sense because she is an expert, a leading expert on delegation and remote teams. And it is so exciting to have you here. Welcome, Valerie.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I am excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about ChatterBoss.
ChatterBoss is a remote executive assistant company. We work with entrepreneurs and business owners, and what we do is we pair them to a dedicated team of assistants. So what makes ChatterBoss unique is that you are not just getting one person, you are getting at least a team of two people that are working alongside the entrepreneur in supporting them. And, I've been in the industry now for 7 years. I've seen the industry grow and, expand in lots of different directions. And there's always a conversation around, what are assistants, what are virtual executive assistants? And what makes ChatterBoss stand out is we are more than just task doers. You really get a thought partner and somebody that is there to be your right hand. So lots of entrepreneurs will say that we're like a mini COO for them. And it's been a really fun ride these past 7 years.
Well, that's really interesting. The notion of the having a COO, that is what really, in my experience, has been missing from a lot of the virtual and remote assistance that we get, is that it still doesn't feel like a company running like a company. It feels like a solopreneur running like a solopreneur with a little help. That's kind of how it's felt. What are some of the key things that you think have led to this kind of revolution?
Well, look, definitely COVID helped, right? For us in the way of growth and acceleration, COVID helped, because prior to COVID, and we launched in 2016. Prior to that, people would come in and they wouldn't really understand what a virtual assistant does as much. And lots of times there was a lot of hesitation of like, can we do this remote? So with the transition of everything remote during COVID, it helped a lot for ChatterBoss, because now people are like, I got it. I could even have doctors remote. Why can't I have an assistant remote, right? So that question has really gone out of the vocabulary. But one thing that I do talk a lot about in the book as well is, in my opinion, why we're also here, aside from the fact that like COVID accelerated this direction, we were going in this direction anyway, right? There's been companies that have been doing and people that have been doing virtual executive assistant support, for 20 plus years. So it's been around for a while, and it's the acceleration of people becoming entrepreneurs, right? Like there is a need, and because we're breaking free of like the golden handcuffs and we're coming out of these corporations and we're starting businesses, that in and of itself is growing the need for the virtual assistant services, because everyone who runs a business needs somebody to delegate to. And most certainly every business must have at least one virtual executive assistant on their team.
Yeah, that is one thing that definitely happened during COVID. People reflected on what did we want to do? What kind, it affected my business. It was why I started podcasting, was to open the world up a little bit and start to connect with people, because we were connecting virtually. So now what we realized was, as much as it, sucked to be like stuck in one place, it was like, well, now the whole world is able to communicate with me, and it won't be strange. It's like everybody's reaching out, and then everybody starts thinking about how they could start their own business, and all the resources that help everybody kind of create their own businesses all of a sudden started to bloom. Now, where geographically, where are you?
Mm-hmm. So I'm in Florida, I'm in Miami. And so, our kind of company headquarters are in Florida, but really our entire team is all over the US. Our model is also different from lots of other virtual assistant companies, where you believe that, your assistant is going to be out of the country somewhere, offshore. There's a big association with VAs and being out of the country. The ChatterBoss model is that it's a US based executive assistant. And it is my belief that as a US based entrepreneur, your primary and dedicated assistant should be US based. Now, offshore is wonderful. You can utilize it. In fact, our team also has an office in South Africa. So we do have assistants that are in South Africa and operating there. But your dedicated person should be US based. It decreases any kind of miscommunication, any kind of friction that can come up. And I believe that right now we're in over 46 states in terms of our US based assistants. So we pretty much have an assistant in every state right now.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question. I was going to ask you about the scope of ChatterBoss and its kind of growth. But before we get to that, I do think that there is both a cultural connect that is important, and also just on a practical level, time zones and other considerations that, now how does that affect cost for the client?
Well, of course, the cost of living in the US is higher. You're going to pay more for the US, but it's not just to cover the cost of living, right? You're also getting experts inside of the executive assistant space. And so that is the main difference from when you are, a lot of the time, when you're going offshore, it is essentially centers that will train people to do very specific functions of an organization. And again, it has a really real place for entrepreneurs inside of their business strategy to consider that. But you have people that are trained on very specific things. And what you're going to have to do as an entrepreneur is also be very specific on how you delegate. So, like I will always say, if you're going offshore, you should know that you are a strong delegator. You've delegated before. You have good standard operating procedures. You're able to explain them. You have patience. You have time. It takes time. And if you talk to agency owners who have VA companies abroad, they're going to tell you it takes time. Don't even start if you don't have the patience to see the first 3 to 4 months without much of an input from what is being done. The difference with our assistants and the way that we work, you can get set up very quickly. and you're going to have an expert guiding you. So you're going to have your assistant making SOPs for you. You're going to have your assistant asking the hard questions of you. You're going to have a relationship manager that talks to you about your administrative world and then prepares for you a roadmap. So it's about, which direction do you want? And then, of course, right, if it's saving you time and it's making you money and it's avoiding, stress and anxiety and burnout in that kind of a way where it has real returns, right? Well, then it's valued higher. So you can expect a higher cost. Although I will say this, I know many people that have gone offshore and they're contracted for like 100 hours a month. The value that just because you got 100 hours for $8 an hour doesn't mean that you're going to get that amount of value that you paid overall, right? So sometimes it's, like they'll say, there's a saying, if you think that hiring an expert is expensive, try hiring an amateur. And it's a little bit like
Yeah.
very skilled people offshore, but in the executive assistant space, the US market and having the right person really wins.
Yeah. And ultimately it is that. Ultimately, and I found it work both ways. I found that, sometimes you're able to find somebody offshore who you never would have met otherwise, who's got all kinds of skills and all. But I do feel that the organization as we all are planning at least to grow in some way, that having some, consistency and guidance from that assistant, guidance from their expertise, is really important as well. So tell me about the size of ChatterBoss a little more and where you're envisioning it going next.
So we have a team of over 200 assistants now, which is really exciting. Like I said, we have coverage in almost every state at this point. I bootstrapped the business. So I started 7 years ago. I'm a solo founder, and it's been a really interesting and fun journey. And with that, right, bootstrapping does two things. On the one hand, gives you a ton of freedom to succeed and freedom to fail, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But then, we've reached the stage where, the business is profitable. We're able to make the kind of decisions that we want to make, but we are growing in a way that, we want to make sure that we're still providing excellent service that we're known for. We want to make sure that, it's a real labor of love. Like there's just so much, there's so much that, of course, you use automation and you use all of these technology. It's such a human job. The relationship managers, like our entire team, like the assistants that come on, right? It's so when we're talking about scaling, my goal is for us to be the #1 remote executive assistant company in terms of size over the next 10 years. And what I learned, which I didn't have before, ChatterBoss, was patience. I came in extremely patient and I didn't know how to wait for things. But now I understand the long term, it takes time. And if I want to do it my way, and if I want to have the freedom and the flexibility, but also the focus on the products that are interesting to me inside of ChatterBoss, it's going to take a while. But I see the long-term game. Assistants are, here to stay. Startups are here to stay, right? There's only more and more startups being created. And so, yeah, that's our goal.
Yeah. So what were you doing before? What were you doing prior to starting ChatterBoss?
I was a personal assistant and a chief of staff. So I had an opportunity to work for high net worth individuals and A-list celebrities. And it was a whirlwind of a life. And I learned so many different things. One of the biggest things that I learned that I didn't know prior to starting that kind of work is that I thought that the assistant relationship with the principal is monogamous. So I thought that I'm stepping in and I'm the only assistant on the team.
Right.
And then I learned that high performers who have reached the echelon, the peak of their business, they actually have multiple assistants. They have a very unique strategy in leveraging that talent, and they all often have 2, 3, 4, 5 people on their team for continuity and for additional support. And so actually the idea of ChatterBoss really came from being inside of those businesses, being inside of those homes, and being able to see those strategies for leverage, and then just being able to bring that over to the small business and the entrepreneurs.
That's interesting as well, bringing this over to small business entrepreneurs, because I was curious what the breadth of your clientele is. Like who are most commonly your clients, these days?
We work with small businesses, we work with entrepreneurs. On average, the kind of client that we support has been in business for some years, so 4, 5, 6 years, their business is established. But we have set up operations in such a way that we do not kind of push away. In fact, we encourage entrepreneurs and businesses and startups that are early on in the stages. I have an article that I published on Medium that I talk about, like there's different stages of your business. And when you're very early on, there are barriers to delegating. But when you're later on, there's other barriers to delegating. So we support entrepreneurs from the time that, they give birth to the idea of their business. And we do have very often second and third time entrepreneurs, because they already understand that they cannot run a business without an assistant. Often first-time entrepreneurs need time to get to that realization. So we will support people right at the beginning stage, and all the way through. And we do also support startups. We support startups that are funded and have, hundreds of employees, but their strategy, what they need is an administrative kind of overarching plan, somebody that's going to manage all of their administrative needs. And that's what we come in and, we'll say, okay, now we're giving you a team to support sales. We're giving you a team to support customer service. We're giving you a team to support your finance, so that like everything for that organization related to administrative lives with ChatterBoss.
So now the question becomes, if a funded startup or a small business can find its staffing solutions, let's say, in the remote space with a company like ChatterBoss, how does that cost compare to, if they were to actually staff up? Now that people are working remote, now that so many people are working remote, even when they're in-house at a company, how does that scenario kind of balance out?
It's a great question, because what ends up happening in the administrative services for companies that hire on their own, and why they choose to go, for example, with ChatterBoss, is because what they will do, a lot of it is strategy, which in the end, effective strategy is what saves you money and gives you the ROI, and ineffective strategy, can sink the boat a lot of the times. So here's what I've seen organizations do. They bring on one EA, and they say this one EA now supports 7 executives, and they think that they've saved money. But what ends up happening is that none of these 7 are really getting supported in the way that they need. And so you may believe that you are, saving money by doing this in this kind of a way. But the truth is, you are now having these high-level executives who you're paying so much for their time not being as efficient. And the reason that this is not a great strategy is because I've never seen 7 executives that need the same kind of personality, support, skill set. So now you're setting up one individual to be completely the Jill or the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And you're saying you should work well with all personalities and all projects and all needs, and that's just never the case. So where you have an opportunity with ChatterBoss is that we come in and we say, okay, Hirsch, you need 5 hours a week, and you need it to focus on social, right? Because that's what's like draining your resources. So we're going to give you 5 hours a week of a person that knows this, that's excited to work with you, and who is an expert in this. Now we're going to look at the next executive. They need email and calendar management, right? So it's just so you might have a team that shares 3 assistants. You might have every single person having a different one, but that's a strategy worth considering.
Yeah, for sure. I wish it had been as developed when I had my own agency, and we were involved in hiring full-time people and part-time people. I mean, those were kind of your options. But first of all, I don't think that that one person could work effectively for even 2 partners in a company. And then the other thing was that we would say, oh, well, this person is really, really great at this. They're not so great at that. What should we do? Do we now have to hire a different person to do that? Or do we keep looking? Or do we try to train this person to do, it's obvious. A lot of people have struggled with this stuff, but there was a comfort level of having a team or a staff or a EA that you could rely on. And that's something that's not as easily, executed necessarily if you're going offshore, or if you're using, myriad VAs without some kind of real unity umbrella, so to speak. So now we've covered the company stuff, but now talk to me a little bit in some of the time that we have left about how you are branding and marketing ChatterBoss.
Our marketing and our branding came so, I want to say, organically over the years. We were really focused in the early years on just providing a good service, on learning from our clients, on learning from our assistants. And about 2 years into ChatterBoss, we also did an exercise to discover and create our core values. That helped us a lot with marketing. So our director of marketing comes from this organizational psychology background, which has been so helpful. She helped us create the original core values that 5 years ago. The team has grown and we've recommitted to our core values. And so we have looked at what we kind of created in a silo when we were very small with very few people, and we expanded that to include the voices of our internal team. We have a team of 12 now. And so we got that opportunity to do that project together. And today our marketing, our branding is really grounded in who we are, what our values are, and how we can educate the consumer. We're not just about kind of pairing you to somebody and just letting you kind of run with it. We are about educating. We're about research. It's why I wrote the book, right? We want to educate both assistants and clients and ultimately make a dent and a contribution in the field of delegation from a psychological perspective. And so our marketing and our branding ties really closely with that. And I believe that it's working because the kind of clients that come in are just super self-aware. We're getting clients that are engaging in this conversation. We also do character assessment and we lead on psychometrics, and they're really, excited about that. And so it's where I'm so grateful for the way that our marketing is set up, because it attracts for us like our soul clients, like the people that we want to work with and the people that our assistants want to work with.
Yeah. And then finally, as a founder and CEO who's crossed the 7-year mark successfully and growing, and during, I should add, very tumultuous times and times of uncertainty, what advice would you give to a bootstrapping entrepreneur founding their own company at this particular moment?
When I started, I didn't think that bootstrapping was sexy. I didn't think that bootstrapping was the way to go. I saw so much what was highlighted in the conversation for entrepreneurs, centered around how much did you raise and who are the people that are giving you money. And so watching the last few years, I mean, I like, thank you for acknowledging that. It's been really hard. It's been really hard for entrepreneurs. It's been hard on small businesses. It's been just like a continuous up and down. And I think that it kind of also rebranded people that are bootstrapping from, so I think it's been fascinating. And so if you are somebody that is bootstrapping, first of all, congratulations. Like, there's just so much freedom in the choice that you're making for yourself. But number two, I think ties back to what I said earlier. You're going to have patience, and you're going to have to see things in the long term. And in the long term, it just, in my humble opinion, right? Because like, of course, like I'm biased, right? Like now that I'm on this track and it's worked out for me, one thing that I've seen is that companies that have gotten a lot of funding, they seemed to me to be growing faster, quicker. They were doing things that I wanted to, but then they also very quickly burned, and they very quickly went out of business. And so I think that as a bootstrapped company, if you're making that decision, have patience. You're going to have your moment. It takes time. It's not one of those things that is just going to come, kind of like land from the sky, that it, sometimes like there are certain opportunities that open things up for that way, but have patience, and you're going to do it. And you can't give up, because, the world needs, sustainable companies, right? I think that if you're bootstrapped and it's working, you have a sustainable business, and it's your job to continue going, because all of those companies that are like laying people off, I'm sorry, right? Not sustainable, but you have something sustainable, you have to keep going.
All right.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, that.
subscribe and leave a
Yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.
Yes.